secure top here, and these are 100 ancient cities found where, according to all data, there shouldn't be anything. The Ashoka pillar in Delhi, India, is a 7-meter iron pillar that has been standing in the courtyard of Qutb Minar for 1,500 years. The metal is dark, but almost without rust, just a thin brown film, like varnish. And legend says that if you wrap your arms around the pillar, your wish will come true. Some say that the pillar was forged using a recipe given by heavenly blacksmiths. What's unusual about the pillar is that ordinary iron in the Indian climate gets covered with a reddish coating in just a couple of seasons. But here, everything is intact. The material has been studied many times. It turned out that the shaft is welded from hundreds of strips of wrought iron with a high phosphorus content and almost no sulfur. When rain slightly corrodes the surface, the phosphorus reacts and forms a dense passive film that blocks oxygen better than any paint. The column was turned so that the side richer in phosphorus faced the midday sun. The heat helped the protective film form more quickly. The column's durability isn't miraculous, but the result of quality ore and skilled craftsmen's calculations. Still, it appears out of place among the railings and staircases of the complex. A tourist touching the cold metal doesn't notice the phosphorus oxides, but scientists wonder how blacksmiths of the 5th century, without blast furnaces or laboratories, could have chosen a composition that would outlast them by 10 times. The answer is known, but the sense of the magic of iron does not disappear. A forgotten civilization. On one of the plateaus of western India, far from cities and tourist routes, archaeologists discovered petroglyphs that, according to preliminary estimates, are more than 12,000 years old. They are carved directly onto the stone surface. The figures are strange, like stylized people with elongated bodies, heads, and arms that look more like something else. Some of the images draw direct parallels with Sumerian mythology and the Inca civilization. A similar image is found on seals discovered in Mesopotamia. It is seen as a celestial being, a mediator between worlds. Now, the same silhouette appears on an Indian plateau thousands of kilometers away. Scientists are cautious, calling it a coincidence of forms. They say that for now, we cannot speak of a single culture, but there is another perspective. Perhaps these images are the last trace of a civilization we know nothing about at all, which existed long before writing, before the Vedas, before the Indus culture, and its traces remain only on stone. There are more questions than answers. Who carved them? What do they mean? Why do they look so similar to images from other corners of the ancient world? And how did it happen that these signs were literally underfoot, yet almost no one knew about them? A dwarf or another human species? Open any textbook and it states clearly that there's only one type of human on Earth, and humans have always been like us. There is, of course, Darwin's theory that our ancestors were apes. Some believe that we came from another planet. But I want to tell a more down-to-earth story. The island of Flores in Indonesia. Liangbua Cave, 2003 archaeologists who were looking for something completely different, found the skeleton of an adult woman. She was just over a meter tall. Her brain was the size of a grapefruit, 3 times smaller than ours. At first they thought it was a child or a large dwarf. But then, from the same layer, they found a second person just like her, then a third. And it became clear. It was an entire people of tiny humans who made tools, built fires, and hunted. They were nicknamed hobbits. And here comes the most interesting part, which is why I started this channel. At first, they thought these dwarfs survived almost until our time. They lived just 12,000 years ago. It turns out we could have encountered them alive just yesterday, historically speaking. But in 2016, the cave was excavated again. They double-checked the age, and it turned out that the hobbits went extinct much earlier, about 50,000 years ago, right around the time when our ancestors first arrived on the island. So it turns out we almost encountered them, and maybe that's exactly why they're gone now. Their life wasn't easy. On the same island, a dwarf elephant was born, which they used to hunt, and a 3-meter monitor lizard, the very same Komodo dragon that still lives there and sometimes attacks people. Just imagine a person the size of a 5-year-old child who goes out with a stone spear against a lizard the length of a car, and somehow they manage to survive for thousands of years. And let me tell you, without any fairy tales, These weren't elves or aliens. This is a real type of human that science has recognized and named Homo floresiensis. Scientists only argue about why they became so small. Some believe the island is responsible. With scarce food and no predators, animals shrink over thousands of years. That's why even the elephants became dwarfs. But as you've already understood, it's not about height. It turns out we weren't alone on this planet. A completely different group of people lived alongside us. And apparently, we had a lot more of these neighbors than we were told in school. Madagascar, 10th century. Southwest of the island, Igorombe region, on the Taniki Plateau, a team from the University of Bern discovers an entire stone world. Terraces, niches carved into the rock, artificial pools, and traces of a quarry, all scattered over an area of more than 8 square kilometers. Radiocarbon analysis of charcoal from the cultural layer consistently points to the 10th to 12th centuries. And this is where it gets really interesting. Certain elements of the complex bear an eerily precise resemblance to Iranian Zoroastrian burial monuments, towers of silence, where bodies were left under the open sky, and the cleaned bones were later moved to stone storage chambers. In the niches of Taniki, you can see recesses for doorways. Some rooms repeat the layout of Persian crypts. There are no direct remains. The climate could have erased them, but the architectural logic strongly suggests that groups with Iranian religious roots were present in Madagascar in the early Middle Ages. Fragments of Chinese and South Asian ceramics from the 11th to 14th centuries add another line of evidence. The island was so linked to the Indian Ocean trade network that even a settlement 200 kilometers inland was part of the transoceanic exchange. If the hypothesis is confirmed, textbook models of Madagascar's two-source settlement will have to be rewritten to add a Persian element and overland routes across the interior plateau. Maya cosmogram. In southern Mexico, in the state of Tabasco, archaeologists studied the Aguada Phoenix site, a huge earthen structure hidden beneath the forest. It's almost invisible in satellite images, but LiDAR, a laser scanning technology capable of removing vegetation, revealed the clear outlines of a platform nearly 1.5 kilometers long. This structure turned out to be older than all known Maya centers. It's from around the year 1000 BC, which is 1,000 years earlier than the appearance of their famous pyramids and cities. They found remains of canals, dams, and straight roads around the platform, all aligned precisely with the cardinal directions. All of this looks like a carefully planned complex built without stone, only from earth and clay. Scientists call Aguado Phoenix a cosmogram. This is not a temple or a city, but rather a symbolic space, a model of the world embodied in the landscape. Judging by the findings, mass gatherings, rituals, and ceremonies took place here. No traces of kings, palaces, or sculptures exist. It appears everything was built collectively by communities, not under central authority. This discovery was unexpected for archaeologists. Previously, it was believed that monumental structures among the Maya appeared only after the formation of complex cities and an elite. But Aguado Phoenix shows the opposite. Large structures could have appeared before the formation of states as a result of collective efforts. Today, the site continues to be studied. For the local residents, it is becoming a point of pride. And for archaeologists, it serves as a reminder that history does not always develop in a straight line. Sometimes people create not for power, but for an idea. An entire city at the bottom of a lake. Kyrgyzstan's mountain lake Issyk-Kul is one of the largest in the world. It's almost 200 kilometers long, surrounded by the ridges of the Tian Shan Mountains. It doesn't freeze even in winter because of its salinity and depth. In 2023 and 2024, a group of diver researchers explored the underwater area near the shore. And what they described in the expedition report sounds like the plot of an adventure movie. At the bottom of the lake, there are streets, brick buildings, and furnace complexes. Under a layer of loose sand, there is a well-preserved cultural layer literally permeated with traces of human activity. Pottery shards, animal bones, and slag from metal smelting. They found a 13th, 14th century Muslim necropolis next to the buildings. The cemetery, measuring 300 by 200 meters, is neat and well preserved. People lived here, traded, and buried their dead. Then the water came and covered the entire city. The Tian Shan Mountains are seismically active. Geologists link the flooding to a major earthquake in the 15th century. The shore subsided, the water level rose, and the city disappeared. Apparently, there were few casualties. People managed to leave in time. After that, the shores of Issyk-Kul continued to be used by nomadic tribes. Small villages still stand here to this day. But here's what's important. For centuries, trade routes of the Silk Road passed around this lake. The main route went from the Chui Valley through the Bedel Pass into China. Issyk-Kul was not just a lake. It was a crossroads where merchants from dozens of countries met. Silks, spices, metals, and ideas flowed through here. And now, this trading post on one of the main routes of the medieval world lies several meters underwater, along with streets, ovens, and a cemetery. Underwater excavations have only just begun, and researchers say that the well-preserved cultural layer promises many more discoveries. No one knows exactly what else lies there yet. A hermit who became solitary, a separate species. Since we've established that we're only alone in the textbook, let's go to Altai, to the Denisova cave. In one of the layers of earth there, in 2008, they found a tiny bone fragment. Just a finger phalanx the size of a bean. Finds like this are usually not even looked at twice, but this one was sent for DNA analysis. And in 2010, they decoded the genome. The geneticists were shocked. It wasn't a human in the usual sense, and it wasn't a Neanderthal. It was a completely unknown species of human to science. Until that moment, no one had even heard of it. An entire branch of humanity was identified from a single fragment of a finger belonging to a girl about 6 or 7 years old. They were called Denisovans, after the name of the cave. And later they found just a couple of teeth and a fragment of a jaw. And that's all there is from an entire species of intelligent beings. A handful that would fit in a matchbox. We still don't know what their faces look like. Not a single complete skull. Not a single skeleton. Just a phantom people known only from DNA and 3 teeth. And yet they lived across a vast territory from Siberia to Southeast Asia, tens of thousands of years ago. And they met our ancestors so closely that many people today still have a piece of Denisovan in their blood. For example, among the people of Tibet. It is their ancient gene that helps people breathe at those altitudes where others suffocate. Just think about that. How much everything was simplified for us back in school when they drew a neat little ladder, a monkey, then a hunched ancestor, and then suddenly us. In reality, it wasn't a ladder, but an overgrown dark forest where several different types of humans wandered at the same time. They slept in the same caves and had children together. And to this day, we still don't know how many more types of humans we might find in the future, maybe even alive. I don't know about others, but I would really like to meet these ancient people. It saddens me that we lack this opportunity. A fingerprint in the sea. There is a tiny island in the Adriatic Sea. Its area is only 0.14 square kilometers. It is uninhabited. There is no pier, no buildings, not even paths, only rocks. From above, you can see something hidden from the ground. The entire island is covered with dozens of kilometers of stone walls. They twist, intersect, form loops, circles, and lines. The whole structure resembles a giant fingerprint. The island is called Baljanak. Several centuries ago, farmers from the neighboring island of Caprige came here. They planted grapevines and olive trees, and by hand, stone by stone, they built protective walls against the wind, without cement, without machinery, only the strength of their hands and patience. Even the numbers are impressive. On a 1.5-kilometer-long island, there are 23 kilometers of walls across the Šibenik archipelago. About 100 kilometers have been built by hand. Today, these walls are protected by UNESCO as a monument to human labor, but no one lives on Baljanak. The walls remain, but the people have left. A pyramid on the site of a volcano. The Great Pyramid at the Mayan site of San Andrés was built in response to the eruption of the Tierra Blanca Joven volcano in the Lake Ilopango caldera. San Andrés, located in the Zapotitan Valley in the La Libertad department of El Salvador, was founded around 900 BC as an agricultural center and became the capital of a Mayan state between 600 and 900 AD. The eruption of the Tierra Blanca Joven volcano, which occurred around 539 BC, was one of the largest volcanic events in history, ejecting about 43.7 cubic kilometers of volcanic material. It caused significant climate changes and devastated an area with a radius of up to 100 kilometers. Dr. Akira Ashikawa from the University of Colorado Boulder noted that because of the scale of the disaster, many settlements were abandoned, and it took a long time for them to recover. However, research in San Andres, just 40 kilometers from Lake Ilopango, showed that construction began just a few years after the eruption. The beginning of the construction of the La Campana pyramid is dated to just 5 to 30 years after the eruption, and its completion took about 80 years. The pyramid, 7 meters high and with a volume of 23,000 cubic meters, became the largest structure in the valley. Dr. Ashikawa suggests that the pyramid was built using the volcano. The doctor believes volcanic ash was used as a material and that it had religious significance, connected to the veneration of volcanoes to protect against future eruptions. The terrifying secret of the Black Death. The study of an ancient Egyptian mummy has shed light on the early spread of the deadly bubonic plague in North Africa. The 3,290-year-old remains kept in the Egyptian Museum of Turin have astonished scientists. Traces of the Yersinia pestis bacteria were found in the bones, and even in the intestinal contents. It turned out that the disease had entered the region long before the Black Death epidemic that raged in Europe in the 14th century. Until now, the oldest mentions of the plague came from Asia. The discovery, which is 5,000 years old, was made in Russia, along with materials from Europe and Asia. But the mummy from Turin confirmed for the first time that the dangerous pathogen had also settled in ancient Egypt. Scientists recalled that fleas were found in the village of Amarna, where the builders of Tutankhamun's tomb worked. They are the main carriers of the infection. There are even mentions in the Ebers Papyrus, which is more than 3,500 years old, about a mysterious bubo filled with pus. This suggests that the plague could have spread from Nile rats to ship passengers, who eventually carried the disease throughout the Mediterranean. Thus, the Black Death became just a vivid chapter in the long history of the plague. And now it's clear that its sinister waves swept across the world much earlier than previously thought, and Africa played a much more significant role in this process. People make money off them. Peru, the Paracas Peninsula, where in 1928, an archaeologist excavated an ancient cemetery and unearthed skulls. But the skulls were somehow unusual, elongated far back, long, like a melon, with an unusually large volume. And they didn't find just one or two, they found more than 300. This is where the part begins that makes me both love and hate this topic at the same time, because there is an honest explanation, which I even kind of like. Many peoples around the world deliberately elongated the skulls of infants. The head of a newborn, while the bones are still soft, was simply wrapped with cloth and squeezed between boards. And in a couple of years, it would become elongated. This was a way to show noble origin, like I'm not a commoner, royal blood flows in me. This was done in Peru, in Africa, and even in France up until the 19th century. At the same time, the brain itself didn't change, only the shape of the skull. But there's another explanation, and people make good money off it. Videos are going viral online where people seriously tell you that they supposedly found unknown, non-human DNA in these skulls, that it's an alien hybrid. And here's what annoys me. Under every such video, there's always a promotional link urging you to buy a book, support the research, or fund the next expedition. Ancient customs have been turned into a way to make money off naive viewers. I believe there's no alien DNA there at all. None of those sensational analyses have ever been repeated or confirmed by any independent geneticist, and the skull deformation has long been explained. Especially nowadays, people themselves change their appearance beyond recognition. They lengthen their necks, get implants, inject oils under their skin, and enlarge their lips. So we ourselves have no idea what we'll look like in the near future. But I'll finish the story about the skulls with something interesting. A couple of specimens from Paracas still stand out from the rest. Bandaging changes the shape of the head, but it shouldn't change the volume and weight of the bone itself. There, you'll find skulls that are larger and heavier than normal, and science still lacks a clear explanation. A stone tower? In Barramini, Sardinia, there stands a strange structure, a 3-story tower made of huge stone blocks. No cement, no arches, no metal. Everything holds together by weight and precision. This is Su-Nuraxi, the heart of the ancient Nuragic culture that lived here more than 3,000 years ago. The tower is surrounded by a ring of smaller towers connected by walls, and inside, a well is carved directly into the rock. It is 15 meters deep, and there is still water in it to this day. Scientists believe that Nuraghi served as a fortress, a symbol of power, and possibly a place for rituals at the same time. The unique feature of Su-Nuraxi is that it has been preserved almost completely. You can climb the stairs, walk through the inner corridors, and see how people of the Bronze Age built things. Each slab weighs several tons, but they are laid so precisely that you can't fit a knife blade between them. Excavations have shown that this place was used for centuries. Initially used as a fortification, it later served as a settlement, storage, and burial site. In the 20th century, archaeologist Giovanni Liliu excavated the complex and showed it was an entire stone city, not just a single tower. The Nuraghis reminded us that Bronze Age Europe wasn't primitive. People here knew how to design, build, and create monuments that have stood for millennia. An ancient structure in the Black Sea. Off the coast of Abkhazia, scientists from an international underwater archaeological expedition discovered important archaeological finds. With the help of special equipment and divers, they explored depths from 1 to 60 meters in the waters near the cities of Gudauta and Sukhum. The most significant find was the discovery of the remains of a medieval structure in the Sukhum Bay at the mouth of the Besledka River, where the ancient city of Dioscuria was presumably located. In this area, where an ancient stele had previously been found, archaeologists discovered a semicircular masonry structure, probably a tower with attached walls. It is made of large pebbles with a limestone mortar. There is pottery present in the masonry, and due to the large amount of sand and silt in the water, it was difficult to photograph the object. So a detailed survey is planned for 2024-2025. In the waters near the city of Gudauta, archaeologists found many vessels from the ancient and medieval periods, including an amphora at a depth of 48 to 50 meters, 460 years at the bottom of the Baltic. In 1563, Swedish King Erik XIV built a ship that was supposed to change the balance of power in the Baltic. Mars, 48 meters long, 1,800 tons, 107 guns on board. One of the first three-masted giants in Europe, the flagship of the fleet, which even enemies were afraid to see on the horizon. The Danes and the Germans understood that in an open battle with such a ship, they had no chance at all. On May 30th, 1564, Mars engaged in battle with the Danish-German fleet. The first day belonged to the Swedes. Their artillery literally swept everything in its path. But on the second day, the weather turned bad, the Swedish squadron scattered, and the huge Mars was left alone against the entire enemy squadron. The German ships chose a clever tactic. They stayed out of cannon range, but started bombarding the flagship's deck with incendiary shells, a mixture of sulfur, tar, and saltpeter. While the Swedes were putting out the fire, about 300 boarders from Lubeck landed on board, and in the heat of the hand-to-hand fight, the fire reached the powder magazine. The explosion was so powerful that the bow of the ship was found 40 meters from the main hull. Along with the Mars, 700 to 800 Swedes and several hundred Germans went to the bottom. The ship that was supposed to change the history of the Baltic served for exactly 1 day of battle. The ship lay at the bottom of the Baltic for more than 460 years and was preserved in amazingly good condition. Cold, brackish water, weak currents, and most importantly, there are no shipworms in the Baltic Sea, which destroy wooden hulls in other seas. Scientists found deformed bronze cannons there, damaged by the explosion, incendiary grenades, boarding hooks that had only been seen before in old paintings, and bones with saber marks. The Baltic Sea preserved not just a ship, but a complete picture of a 16th century naval battle, with all the details that history usually doesn't preserve. Dinosaurs that never existed. Mexico, the town of Acambaro. In 1944, a German merchant was riding on horseback there. He noticed a piece of pottery in the ground and started digging. Over several years, he unearthed more than 30,000 clay figurines. Among them were people, gods, animals, and even dinosaurs. And not just generic lizards, but quite recognizable ones with crests and plates on their backs. On some figurines, there's even a person next to the dinosaur, as if they lived at the same time. Fans of alternative history, of course, are delighted. Here it is. proof that humans lived side by side with dinosaurs, which means all of geology is lying. And the Earth isn't millions of years old. Unfortunately, most likely, it's a 20th century forgery. Local peasants were paid for every figurine they brought in. At that time, dinosaur movies were everywhere, and magazines with pictures were being sold. So it's clear where the idea came from. No further explanation needed. But I'll still tell you why I can't shake this story. When the figurines were sent for analysis to determine when the clay was last fired, the lab gave a result thousands of years ago. It smelled like a sensation. Even a respected American professor publicly vouched for the authenticity of the finds, and he basically ruined his whole career because of it. Then the lab suddenly withdrew its result. They said they made a mistake in their calculations. Who pushed them to do this and why so quickly is still unclear. And this, in my opinion, is the very reason why you might be watching this channel. It's not about dinosaurs with humans. I don't believe in that. It's about something else. When the result is convenient, all the scientists and historians talk about it right away and turn it into a sensation. But when it's inconvenient, they quietly hide it as if it never existed. That's what annoys me. Holy water from the air conditioner. A funny incident happened at the Sri Banke Bihari temple in Vrindavan, India, which could have happened anywhere. But it looks especially striking in a country with hundreds of gods and temples for every occasion. Believers crowded around the statue of an elephant, from which water was dripping drop by drop. They decided that it was holy water from Krishna's feet. However, in reality, the water was just simple condensation dripping from the air conditioner, cooling the temple. For people who had never encountered air conditioners, this explanation was not sufficient. The devotees continued to insist that this was the very nectar from Krishna's lotus feet, which the temple attendants collect every morning during the washing of the divine feet. The temple even had to issue an official statement to dispel the myth and warn people against drinking this water. The danger of such water is that fungi and bacteria can form in the air conditioning system, which can easily get into the droplets. This could lead to infections, but it should be noted that the stomachs of the locals are used to unfavorable conditions. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to buy food at street markets. When this incident was reported on television, the believers were even offended at the temple authorities for not warning them earlier. But how can you change the mind of someone who already believes? This task is almost impossible. He burned down a wonder of the world for likes. In ancient Ephesus, on the western coast of Asia Minor, archaeologists restored the outlines of the famous Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the world. Only fragments of columns and the foundation remain, but even that is enough to understand the scale. However, one of the strangest and saddest stories of antiquity is connected with the temple, the story of Herostratus. In 356 BC, he set fire to the temple. Not for revenge or faith, but for fame. Herostratus wanted his name to be remembered, even if he had to pay for it with his life. The temple burned down on the same night, according to legend, that Alexander the Great was born. The fire destroyed one of the greatest structures of the ancient world and became an example of senseless destruction. After the fire, the authorities of Ephesus forbade mentioning the name of Herostratus under penalty of death, but this ban had the opposite effect. The name survived. The historian Theopompus recorded it, along with the paradox itself. The man who destroyed a masterpiece became immortal precisely because of his crime. When archaeologists in the 20th century excavated the lower layers of the sanctuary, they found traces of an ancient fire, charred beams and melted fragments of tiles. And even in these pieces of ash, a strange irony can be felt. The greatest temple of its era was destroyed not by enemies, not by a natural disaster, but by a man who wanted to be remembered. Today, the name Herostratus has become a symbol of destructive fame, a reminder that history remembers not only creators, but also those who tried to be remembered at any cost. Even today, we often see bloggers who, for the sake of popularity, are ready to do terrible things. It turns out people practiced this even thousands of years ago. A brewery from the time of Egypt's first rulers. Archaeologists have discovered the oldest brewery in the world, located in the necropolis of Abydos, Egypt. This discovery not only sheds light on early brewing technologies, but also helps us understand how resources were managed during the construction of the pyramids. The complex consists of 8 massive installations, each up to 20 meters long. Each of them contains 2 rows of 40 vessels, which were used to heat a mixture of grain and water, a classic beer brewing process. Scientists date the brewery to the era of Pharaoh Narmer, who is considered the founder of the First Dynasty. Dr. Adams, who led the research, called this discovery an example of industrial-scale production and noted that it shows a high level of labor organization in ancient Egypt. The ability to manage the mass distribution of resources and organize the workforce allowed the Egyptians to build grand structures, including the pyramids. In addition, beer played an important role in rituals. Large-scale production in Abydos indicates its use in sacrifices, ceremonies, and rituals, which confirms its significance in the development of Egyptian royal power. He lied twice. And once again, Peru, because this land seems to be made to drive archaeologists crazy. In the city of Ica, back in the 60s, there lived Dr. Javier Cabrera, who once came across a strange black stone with an engraving. He became obsessed with it for the rest of his life, amassing a collection of over 10,000 such stones. They have scenes carved on them that make you uneasy if you know their age. People are looking at stars through a telescope, performing heart surgeries, and transplanting organs. And yes, they're riding dinosaurs again. These are called the Ica stones. Mainstream science quickly decided that they were fakes, and even found the person who made them, a local farmer named Basilio Uchuya. At first, he swore that he found the stones in some secret tunnel, but when pressured, he confessed everything and said that he carved them himself. And to prove he wasn't lying, in 1977, he showed everything on camera in the BBC documentary Paths to the Gods. Right during the filming, he scratched a drawing using dental tools. Then he boiled the stone in manure to make it look ancient, just like that. And he sold it to gullible tourists. You'd think the story ends here. You could turn off the video and go watch the next one. But what comes next is my favorite twist in this story. After some time, Basilio took back his confession. He claimed that he lied about the forgery, and he lied on purpose so he wouldn't be jailed for looting real ancient graves. Because you don't go to jail for making souvenirs, but you do go to jail for looting antiquities, and for a long time. So now you're left wondering. The man confessed to faking the stones, and then he confessed that he lied about the forgery. At this point, nobody knows what's true anymore. Probably not even him. Here's my opinion. One peasant can't scratch out 10,000 stones by hand in a lifetime. That's impossible. So either the forgery was done on a large scale, like a whole village working on it, or some of the stones are actually real. Monster burrows. In South America, there are thousands of tunnels. Some are narrow, like animal passages. Others are like corridors in a military base, 4 meters wide and hundreds of meters long. Who dug them? Water and lava are out of the question. Geologists all agree it wasn't nature. There are grooves on the walls, like claw marks. In one of these caves in Argentina, they found the answer: the skeletons of 2 giant sloths. Each weighed about 4 tons. Their claws were up to 20 centimeters long. They needed tunnels of that size. It is believed that they dug burrows for generations to raise their offspring and to shelter from the glacial climate. And the narrower passages might have belonged to other monsters, ancient giant armadillos. Their modern descendants also dig, just on a smaller scale. And this raises the question, what else lies beneath our feet? If such tunnels could have been dug not by humans, but by animals. A giant military memorial. Archaeologists have discovered a 4,000-year-old memorial monument at the site of Banabazi in Syria, resembling the ancient Egyptian step pyramid in Saqqara. This artificial mound, known as the White Monument, because of the shine of its building materials, was first studied several decades ago. Recent research has shown that around 2000 BC, the previously existing mound was modified and supplemented with a series of horizontal steps, each containing at least 30 burials sealed with layers of plaster. Ancient Mesopotamian texts mention military memorials where the bodies of enemies were piled up, although such monuments have not yet been found. However, the White Monument at Tel Banat apparently served as a memorial for the burial of the settlement's inhabitants, not for enemies fallen in battle. The discovery calls into question some traditional ideas in Near Eastern archaeology. The monument was comparable in size to the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, but it was built not from stone, but from earth. The burials in the White Monument were carefully arranged according to ritual customs, along with military equipment, sometimes next to projectiles and animal hides. This fact indicates that the community tried to honor their warriors by creating a memorial in their honor. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan. In a granite quarry near Aswan lies a gigantic unfinished obelisk, almost 42 meters long and weighing about 1,200 tons. The craftsmen had leveled the sides and only needed to cut the slab from below and move it to the Nile, but a crack appeared, so they abandoned the work. The traces of tools are visible to the naked eye, long grooves as if scored by a modern cutting tool, and round hollows where the rock was chipped away with crushing blows. Mystery fans are convinced such a smooth cut is remarkable. Only a diamond blade or an unknown energy beam could do this. That means the builders of the temple possessed technology lost along with Atlantis. Archaeologists have a simpler answer. The Egyptians used spherical dolerite hammers. After thousands of strikes, the hard dolerite would batter the granite's quartz grains, leaving a smooth groove. Then, wooden wedges were inserted into the groove and soaked with water. The swollen wood would expand and split off a layer. Gentle vibrations would form even stripes, similar to the work of a modern chisel. Calculations show that with a team of 100 stonemasons, the block could be freed in a few months. A crack made it unusable, and the project was stopped. Today, the unfinished piece lies like a museum exhibit, preserving both the ambitions of the pharaohs and the technologies of the Bronze Age. Some see it as evidence of lost knowledge, while others see it as a textbook on ancient engineering. But both views agree on one thing. To move such a giant, it took not a miracle, but precise calculation and superhuman patience. The Big Orangery, the greenhouse, Chatsworth. Long before the legendary Crystal Palace built by Joseph Paxton for the Great Exhibition of 1851, he honed his skills on the grounds of Chatsworth House in picturesque Derbyshire. There, a colossal great greenhouse grew, a giant glass house where Paxton tested innovative methods that he would later use in constructing London's main architectural sensation. Back in the 1830s, while working as the head gardener, Paxton reimagined the landscape of Chatsworth, creating a 16-hectare arboretum and cultivating exotic plants like pineapples. Modern greenhouses were becoming popular, while Chatsworth's old hothouses had already fallen into disrepair. Paxton introduced a new roof design, angled toward the morning and evening sun, and an original metal frame that allowed for maximum daylight to pass through. This approach was quickly adopted by others. In 1836, he began constructing a grand greenhouse, 70 meters long, 38 meters wide, and almost 20 meters high. Inside, even a couple of carriages could pass through, and a staircase hidden behind rocky outcrops led to a gallery that offered a view of the crowns of tropical palms. The warm climate was maintained by 8 coal boilers, connected by an underground maze of pipes and a railway that delivered fuel. Up to 300 tons of coal were needed for the winter. However, by the beginning of World War I, there was a catastrophic shortage of fuel. The heating was stopped and all the plants died. The extremely expensive large greenhouse was soon demolished. But it was there that the technologies were developed which made the grand illumination of the Crystal Palace possible. Fragments of the Stone Army of Sardinia, a large island in the Mediterranean Sea, west of Italy. In 1974, a local farmer was plowing a field in the area of Monte Monteprama. The plow hit something, and the farmer, taking a closer look, realized that he had pulled a human head carved from stone out of the ground. Archaeologists were called, they started digging, and they uncovered an entire stone army. Warriors with shields, archers, wrestlers, each one about 2 meters tall. They were made by an ancient people who lived on the island thousands of years ago, and they left behind thousands of stone towers, but not a single line of writing. So we don't really know who they were. The statues were not found intact. Someone deliberately broke them into pieces and buried them. Archaeologists collected about 40,000 fragments, and they put the figures back together like a huge stone puzzle. But what grabs you most are their faces. Instead of eyes, there are 2 circles carved out, one inside the other. It's like 2 targets are staring at you. The faces are flat, not lifeless. Those seeing them for the first time said they looked like robots, not people. This led to a theory that they aren't warriors, at all, but aliens that the local people depicted in stone based on what they saw. I don't believe in ancient robots. These statues were made by ordinary people, the ancient Nuragic people who lived in Sardinia, and built those very stone towers. Everything was found and studied, and today the statues stand in a museum. But one mystery remains. It wasn't time that brought these warriors down. Someone deliberately smashed them and buried them in the ground. And next to the statues, they also found human graves, and they were buried carefully in neat rows, one after another, according to some custom of their own, which means they were not savages. Pyramidal ingots. Northern Bosnia, the Sava River. Underwater archaeologists are not retrieving jewelry or coins from the bottom, but hundreds of iron bipyramidal ingots, extremely rare blanks from which 2,000 years ago knives, arrowheads, and parts of everyday items were forged. They are shaped like double pyramids. They are rarely found in large artifact collections. Until now, museums in France, Germany, Slovenia, and Sarajevo had only single specimens. Here, however, there's a whole stockpile. Dating places it roughly in the 1st to 2nd centuries BC, it was a time when local trade networks were being reorganized under the pressure of Rome, and iron was becoming the main currency of craftsmanship. The archaeologist's theory is simple. This is a sunken cargo. The river surged, and the barge could have capsized. A wagon could have gone into the water at the crossing. The current carried away the lighter goods, and the heavy bipyramidal ingots settled in piles on the bottom. The site was measured using reference points. A 3D photogrammetry model was created. Each ingot was immediately placed in distilled water to slow down corrosion. Next comes the chemistry. The analysis will reveal the type of ore used to smelt the iron and the routes used to transport it. If the tracing matches, Sava will emerge as a major transport corridor even before the arrival of Rome, and the Bosanskaya Pass can be seen as a hub where iron was turned into power, into weapons, tools, and infrastructure. This is a rare case when a hoard tells not about luxury, but about production. These are not finished products, but blanks in logistics. It's a useful perspective on the economy of that time. Finds like these make it clear what exactly was traded and how it was transported. An underground chamber beneath the pyramids. Scientists from Japan and Egypt conducted a study of the giant necropolis in Giza. Their attention was drawn to a section in the Western Cemetery. Members of the ruling family and high-ranking officials were buried here. The burials were in tombs with flat roofs, arranged in a row. There is an open area between them that had not been studied before. Japanese and Egyptian scientists studied it using ground-penetrating radar and electrical tomography, which allowed them to look deep inside without excavating. The scan showed that at a depth of 0.5 meter to 2 meters, there is an L-shaped structure, approximately 10 by 10 meters in size. The authors of the study believe that this is not a natural formation, but an artificial one, due to its regular shape and location. The researchers suggest that this structure may be part of a deeper formation. At a depth of 5 to 10 meters, the instruments also detected an anomaly indicating heterogeneity in the rock. This could be another tomb or a chamber with artifacts. They were burned alive. Lovelock Cave, Nevada, USA. The Paiute Native American tribe passed down a terrifying legend from generation to generation. Supposedly, there was once a hostile people living near them, red-haired giant cannibals, taller than any human. The Paiutes fought them for 3 whole years, and in the end, they drove the remaining giants into the cave. They blocked the entrance with branches and brushwood and set it on fire. According to legend, that's how these people were burned alive. For a long time, this was considered just a legend, a scary campfire story. And then, in 1911, 2 workers went into that cave. They were mining guano bird droppings used as fertilizer, and the deeper they went, the more they found. At first, they just found bones, but then they realized these were human skeletons, and there were more than 40 of them. Some of them were huge, 7 or even 8 feet tall, over 2 meters. And near the entrance, they found traces of a strong fire. So everything was exactly like in the Paiute legend, the giants, the cave, and the fire. And then things got even stranger. They took more than 100,000 ancient items out of the cave, and among them, there were some giant ones. For example, a sandal almost 40 centimeters long. That would fit a person, almost 3 meters tall. They also found clothing of that size, as if it was worn by giants, and many of the skeletons had a reddish tint, both in the hair and on the skulls. A descendant of the Paiute chief, a woman named Sarah Winnemucca, even kept a lock of this red hair and sewed it into her dress. She later wore this dress when she spoke about the war with the giants. Many of those huge bones were simply lost over time. Some of the skulls were kept in the local museum, but about 10 years ago, they were removed and quietly buried. And the scientists who later examined the findings did not confirm the existence of giants. The bones belonged to ordinary people, and the red hair color in ancient mummies appears on its own, because dark hair fades and turns red after thousands of years in the ground. But admit it, there's still some doubt. How could a people who didn't know how to read or write have such a detailed history? About a red-haired people, a 3-year war, the cave, and the fire. Traces of fire were found near the entrance. They still sing about this and believe it isn't just a fairy tale, that all of this really happened to their ancestors. And, red-haired giants are remembered not only in Nevada, they talk about them in Peru and New Zealand on Easter Island. I'm not quick to write it all off as fiction. And honestly, I don't understand why the very idea of giants seems so impossible to so many people. If giant lizards, dinosaurs, once walked the earth, then why couldn't there have been big people too? In my opinion, that's a pretty reasonable assumption. The oldest doors of Rome. The bronze doors of the Pantheon in Rome were cast during the reign of Emperor Hadrian around 115 AD, and they remain in their place to this day. Each leaf is about 7.6 meters high and more than 2 meters wide. The structure is made of solid bronze and is designed for precise weight balancing. The hinges, fittings, and proportions allowed the doors to be used daily without additional mechanisms. The surface has preserved traces of time, but the geometry and functionality have remained unchanged. These doors were originally created as part of an architectural ensemble, not as a decorative element. Their production required large casting molds, precise calculations, and access to significant resources. The doors continue to serve their function, having been in active use for almost 2,000 years. An unknown god of ancient Egypt. Here's a name you probably haven't heard before. Pelusium, an ancient Egyptian city on the eastern border of the Nile Delta, the first line of Egypt's defense against eastern invasions. And at the same time, it was a major port city through which everyone passed: Persians, Greeks, Romans, and Arabs. Whoever controlled Pelusium controlled the entrance to Egypt. Today, this place is called Tel El Farama, and Egyptian archaeologists have been excavating here for 6 years. Recently, they discovered a circular temple with a huge pool in the center. It is 35 meters in diameter, about the size of half a football field. The pool was connected by a canal to one of the branches of the Nile, and the water flowed in on its own, murky and rich in silt. Around the pool, there was a whole network of canals and reservoirs to control the flow of water. And right in the center stood a square platform, on which most likely stood a large statue of a deity. To whom was this temple dedicated? To a god named Pelusius, so little known that most historians have never heard of him. His name supposedly comes from the Greek word pelos, meaning mud, clay, or silt. That is, he is the god of Nile silt, a symbol of fertility and renewal. Every year, the Nile would flood and leave a layer of fertile silt on its banks, without which Egypt simply could not have survived. They built a round temple with a living pool that breathed with the river for this god. The architecture of the temple shows traces of several cultures at once: Egyptian layout, Greek proportions, Roman details, which is quite expected for a city at the crossroads of civilization. The temple was used from the 2nd century BC to the 6th century AD, almost 800 years surviving the transition from the Ptolemies to Rome and from Rome to Byzantium. They found it using a satellite and special equipment that scans the ground like an X-ray and shows what's inside without digging. The scan revealed a large building several meters underground. Then they made a small test excavation and saw brick walls, amulets with images of Egyptian gods, and a scarab with a name on it, Pharaoh Thutmose III, who lived 1,000 years before this temple was built, but was revered as a saint for a very long time after his death. For almost 800 years, this basin was filled with water from the Nile. People came here to pray, bringing amulets and offerings, and then everything was covered with sand, and lay buried for another 1,500 years until a satellite looked down from above. Oklo Nuclear Reactor, Gabon, 1972. A laboratory in France receives a batch of uranium ore and notices something strange. The important uranium-235 isotope is depleted by half, as if the fuel has already been burned. The news spreads around the world with shocking information that an ancient nuclear power plant is hidden beneath the African jungle. Scientists rush to the site and drill dozens of boreholes. The picture that emerges is unexpected, but entirely natural. 2 billion years ago, a rare combination of conditions occurred here. Uranium-rich rock, pores between grains of sandstone, and groundwater that slowly flowed through the ore. The water slowed the neutrons, starting the chain reaction until it boiled and stopped the process. After cooling, the layer refilled with water. The reactor kept switching on and off for hundreds of thousands of years, leaving behind a characteristic set of rare isotopes. No man-made nuclear power plant, no intervention from visitors from space, just a lucky geochemical furnace assembled by nature itself. But the story of Oklo is still captivating. It turns out that the planet can build nuclear reactors without engineers. All it needs is uranium, water, and an alien who turned out to be a child. Chile, the Atacama Desert, the driest place on the planet. Here, corpses don't rot, they dry out and remain for centuries. In 2003, a man named Oscar Munoz was wandering through the abandoned mining settlement of La Noria and found a leather pouch. And inside, wrapped in cloth, was a tiny body only 15 centimeters long, about the size of a human hand. And it looked so strange, you just wanted to cross yourself. The head was elongated and pointed. The eye sockets were huge and set at an angle. The teeth were like those of an adult. And there were 10 pairs of ribs instead of the usual 12. They called him Ada. And honestly, just look at him. 9 out of 10 people would say he's an alien. In 2013, a movie about UFOs called Sirius came out, where an American named Stephen Greer announced to the whole world that this was a mummy and that there is evidence of aliens. The video spread all over the world, but it was this very movie that led to the solution. It was examined by Gary Nolan, a professor from Stanford, and he decided to investigate. Moreover, according to him, he didn't go there to debunk anything. On the contrary, he admits that at some point he got excited himself. What if it really was an alien? He took a sample from the rib and decoded all the DNA. In reality, it was a human, a girl. Most likely she was from Chile, and the eerie appearance was due to mutations. They found 64 mutations in her genes that had never been seen in humans before, and they were located exactly in the genes responsible for bone growth and rib count. Because of them, the bones aged prematurely, and by looking at them, it seemed like the child was about 6 or 7 years old, but in reality, it was a premature infant, and the mummy itself is only about 40 years old. So, she was our contemporary. They don't know exactly where this child got so many DNA mutations at once, but there were abandoned mines nearby where they used to extract saltpeter. Doctors believe the mother ingested these chemicals during pregnancy. As usual, some didn't believe it and accused Nolan of being bribed, claiming the team was forced to stay silent. He responded calmly and I think brilliantly. The louder and more unbelievable the sensational claim, the more often it turns out to be a dud. That's why it needs to be cleared away. Because when you clear away all that garbage, sometimes you find something underneath that truly turns science upside down. And do you know what this little Ada ended up doing? It proved that we still don't really know our own bodies. In an ordinary human child, they found mutations that science didn't even know existed. This isn't an alien, and yet it's still an incredible discovery. The grim story of the ancient columns. Sweden is a harsh country, and even among its landscapes there are especially mesmerizing and grim places. One of these is a trio of stone pillars on Gallo Hill in a nature reserve north of Visby. This place claims to be the only surviving medieval execution site in Europe. Veselisa Galberget, located on top of a small hill in the municipality of Visby, is a creepy but historically important place, one of the few preserved since the Middle Ages. Built in the 13th century, it was used for executing local criminals. Tall stone pillars surrounded by a low stone wall supported wooden beams on which the condemned were hung by ropes or hooks. Veselisa was visible from the sea, serving as a warning of the harsh consequences that awaited criminals. During archaeological excavations near Veselisa, the bodies of about 303 people were discovered. All of them had been executed. Some of the bodies were found in wooden coffins, which was a luxury, and indicated that these people belonged to the upper class. This shows that not only robbers and poor people were executed here, but also members of the elite. Desert Castle. In the middle of the dunes in the Algerian desert stands a ruin, lonely, without roads, without a name. Tourists don't come here. There are hardly any satellite images. The place is called Xardra, but that's unofficial. Xar in Berber means palace or castle, and Dra is the name of a river that once flowed nearby. No one knows who built this castle. There are no exact dates, nor any remains of a settlement around it, only stone outlines against the sand. It feels as if the structure was cut out of time and simply forgotten. It's remarkable that despite geolocation, drones, and expeditions, some places remain almost unknown. Perhaps these ruins are the most important of all, because they don't fit into the usual picture. The Rings of Mohenjo-Daro. During the excavation of the ancient city in the 1920s, archaeologists found several bronze rings, each only 1.5 centimeter in diameter. Under a magnifying glass, tiny strokes could be seen on their inner surface, resembling 4 or 5 lines of text. It was as if the craftsmen of the Indus civilization could write finer than a human hair. 8 decades later, the rings were examined under an electron microscope. It turned out that some of the scratches actually matched individual symbols of the Indus script. The rest of the marks are just random pitting. Over thousands of years, crystals of copper and arsenic formed on the bronze. Later, a thin layer of corrosion linked these spots, giving the illusion of a continuous inscription. Judging by their shape, the rings were amulet stamps. They were dipped in clay or soft fabric to make an imprint as a signature, and over time, the working surface wore down to a deceptive pattern. However, the idea of Indus nanoscript did not fade away. Every time another bronze ring falls out of the sifted earth, researchers pick up a microscope. Suddenly, on this very ring, instead of corrosive scratches, there might be a real inscription engraved at a microscopic level. Fear makes the wolf bigger than he is. The year is 1520, the far south of South America. Magellan's crew settles in for the winter on an unfamiliar shore. One of the sailors, the scholar Antonio Pigafetta, who keeps a diary of the entire journey, describes an encounter that's hard to believe. A local resident is standing on the shore. He sings, dances, and tosses sand above his head, and he's such a giant, so huge that the tallest member of the crew only reaches his waist. Pigafetta writes exactly this. This is not a man, this is a giant. And to establish contact, they send a sailor to him. They give him a mirror, and the giant, seeing himself for the first time, gets so scared that he faints. Then Magellan decides to capture a couple of these giants and bring them to Europe to show people, like a freak show. 2 of them were lured with gifts and put in shackles, but on the way home, both died. By the way, Magellan himself didn't make it back to Europe either, and he named this land Patagonia, which roughly translates as the land of the big-footed. That's where the legend started, which people in Europe believed for almost 300 years, and they took it seriously. Other sailors kept bringing back their own stories one after another, but the height of the giants kept growing with each retelling. First it was 7 feet, then 9, and then even 12. On maps, those lands were labeled simply as the Land of Giants, serving as a warning to anyone who ventured there. For 300 years, educated captains seriously swore that they had seen giants with their own eyes. But in reality, the people living there were the Tehuelche, who were about 6'3". To us, they were just big men, but a European of that time, due to constant malnutrition, was barely over 5 feet tall. So next to him, a Tehuelche looked like a real giant, and fear, along with sailors' tales, added another foot or so to the height of this tribe. Charles Darwin settled the argument once and for all. He visited those lands himself and wrote that they were simply the tallest people he had ever seen. But still, they were people, not giants. So it seems like the topic could be closed. But one thought won't leave me alone. Every nation on earth has legends about giants, in every ancient culture, and surely not every single one of them can be made up. There must be something real behind all this. And it's not just about height. The concealment of the truth is happening all over the world. And it doesn't just concern giants, but also the true age of entire civilizations. their knowledge and technologies, which for some reason we're not told about. So if you suddenly dig up something strange in your yard, here's my advice. Don't rush to report it to the authorities. The most unique castle on the planet. Safra Castle is located on a rocky cliff in the Caldera Mountains in the Spanish province of Guadalajara. The plateau's elevation is about 1,400 meters. Access to the top is only possible by a narrow path. This location made the place strategically important long before the appearance of medieval walls. Archaeological evidence indicates human presence here as far back as the Bronze and Iron Ages. This suggests that the site itself, not just the fortress, was used for a long time. The Visigoths and later Muslim rulers used this height as an observation and defensive point. The stone castle, as we know it, began to be built in the 12th and 13th centuries. This was during the period between the Christian kingdoms and the Muslim territories. The architecture is adapted to the landscape. The walls and towers are literally built into the rock without any excessive decorative elements. After the completion of the Reconquista, the military significance of Safra gradually disappeared. By the end of the 15th century, the fortress was abandoned. In the 20th century, the castle was in a ruined state until it was purchased by a private owner who spent decades restoring it. Today, Safra is widely known to the public thanks to the TV series Game of Thrones, where its appearance was used as the model for the Tower of Joy. But the fortress itself is an example of how the same place retains its significance over thousands of years, regardless of the era or culture. Man-made caves underground, England, Shropshire, on the grounds of Cainton Hall. If you walk across the field and look carefully at your feet, you can notice a small hole in the ground, about the size of a rabbit's burrow. But this burrow leads down into a large underground hall, and then into another, and then into an entire system of man-made chambers carved into the red sandstone, with arched ceilings with niches and columns. The official Cainton Caves are dated to the late 18th, the 18th to the early 19th century. Someone put in incredible effort to carve out these halls. The exact reason is unknown. Maybe for storage, maybe as a place of seclusion. But popular rumor has long connected this place with the Templars, the Catholic military order founded in the 12th century. In 200 years, it became the wealthiest organization of the medieval world. In 1307, the French king Philip IV arrested the order's leadership. Torture and executions began, and the order was disbanded. Where the Templar treasures went is still unknown. The shape of the halls really does resemble Romanesque chapels. Low arches, a certain symmetry, niches where statues could have stood. In 2012, the entrance was sealed off because of vandals and people who used the underground halls for occult rituals. Traces of candles and devilish symbols were found on the walls here. In 2017, a photographer published pictures of these halls from the inside, and the caves instantly spread all over the internet. Most likely, it's just a beautiful place that was built in the 19th century by some wealthy landowner with a vivid imagination, and there were never any Templars there. But here's what's interesting. Even if you remove all the legends, the question doesn't go away. Someone put in a huge amount of effort to carve several neat halls with arches and niches into the rock. Why here? Why like this? And what was the purpose? No one really knows to this day. The mummy's mysterious disappearance. 1932, San Pedro Mountains, Wyoming, USA. Many prospectors, including Cecil Maine and Frank Carr, are searching for gold. They blast the rock, and behind it, a small sealed cave is revealed. Inside, on a stone ledge, sits a small figure with crossed legs, about 15 centimeters tall, in a sitting position. The face is not childlike at all. A flattened head, a mouthful of teeth, some of them sharp, dark, wrinkled skin like that of an old man. He was nicknamed Pedro, and immediately an old legend comes to mind. Among the Shoshone Indians, stories about a little people have been passed down from generation to generation. The Namaragar, tiny, evil little men who lived in these mountains. They shot poisoned arrows, and they would finish off their sick and elderly with a blow to the head. And now, in the cave, sits a creature exactly the same height as in the legend, and it even has a fractured skull. In the 1940s and 1950s, the mummies were examined with x-rays, and scientists were divided in their opinions. Some said it was an adult, others said it was an infant with a severe congenital defect. With this condition, the skull doesn't develop and the newborn looks like a little old man. In the end, science leaned toward this version. The child died right after birth, and the dry air of the cave dried him out and preserved him. And it seems like the debate is settled. But then comes the reason why the story isn't closed. The mummy was taken around to fairs, passed from hand to hand. The last owner took it to Florida and died there, and Pedro disappeared without a trace along with his x-rays. It's no longer possible to examine him with modern methods. There's nothing left to examine. A reward of $10,000 was even offered for the find, but he was never found. However, in the 90s, a second similar mummy appeared. It was smaller. They called her Chiquita. This one was properly studied. X-rays, DNA, dating. It turned out to be an Indian baby girl with the same defect. She died several centuries ago, but her owners soon took her from the laboratory and hid her, and she disappeared as well. These mummies disappeared exactly when they could finally be properly studied, as if someone really didn't want the truth to be discovered. A rock-cut tomb. In Malta, builders accidentally stumbled upon an ancient tomb about 2,300 years old. In September, while installing new water pipes near a hospital in the city of Birkirkara, workers discovered a chamber carved into the rock. Later, archaeologists confirmed that it was a Punic tomb. During subsequent excavations, the central shaft of the tomb and 3 burial chambers were discovered. The entrances to them were sealed with original stone slabs. Through narrow gaps, archaeologists saw skeletons and artifacts. Inside the chambers, there were bones arranged in a specific order, as well as urns with ashes. The bones were probably moved to make room for new burials. A total of at least 14 burials were found in the 3 chambers. The remains have already been moved to the laboratory for further analysis. Archaeologists plan to conduct radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis to learn more about the Punic community that created this tomb. The Punic civilization, also known as the Carthaginian Republic, was one of the most influential powers in the Mediterranean until it was conquered by the Romans around 150 BCA continent underwater. On the floor of the Madura Strait near the island of Java, archaeologists found something no one expected. Not a sunken ship, not artifacts, but an entire ecosystem. Layers of earth were the remains of Homo erectus, fragments of skulls, and traces of life about 140,000 years old have been preserved. Along with them, there are bones of giant bulls, turtle shells, and traces of bones broken to extract bone marrow. This is not just an ancient human settlement. It is a fragment of a submerged continent, a vanished world that once connected the islands to the mainland. Scientists call it Sundaland. Today it is underwater, but back then it was plains, something like an Asian savanna with rivers, forests, and herds of large animals. Archaeologists found processing traces on animal bones like those made by mainland Homo erectus, though it was previously thought Javanese groups lacked these skills. Now it's clear the populations had contact and cultural exchange, sharing hunting methods, butchering techniques, and shell processing. This speaks not only about technique, but also about memory and the transmission of knowledge. In addition to traces of hunting, they found remains of mollusks and river sharks. Everything indicates that there was once a rich, vibrant, and complex landscape here, where humans were part of the ecosystem. And now, all of this is at the bottom. Sundaland went underwater tens of thousands of years ago. Without noise, without traces of cities or temples, it simply disappeared. And if it weren't for random finds on the seafloor, we wouldn't even know it existed. It reminds us that huge pieces of history can disappear not because of a catastrophe, but simply because of time. All that's left is a fragment of bones from a cooled fire. Alyoshenko or an alien? Imagine Russia in 1996, the outskirts of the city of Kishtim, the village of Koalinovy. An elderly woman named Tamara Prosverina, who had long been under psychiatric care, brings something alive, small, about 20 to 25 centimeters, home from the forest. The head is elongated like an onion with a crest. The eyes are huge, a small mouth without lips. There are 4 long fingers on each hand, and the skin is grayish. The neighbors later said that it moved and squeaked quietly. Tamara called it Alyoshenka, wrapped it in a scarf, and fed it milk from a dropper. And a few weeks later, she herself was taken to a psychiatric hospital. There was no one left to feed the creature, and it dried up, and it died right in the house. Then real Russian drama begins. First, one of her acquaintances stole the body and dried it out. He wanted to sell it but didn't have time. He was caught stealing copper cable. And during a search, the police accidentally found and took away Alyoshenka's mummy. For some time, it was kept in a safe as evidence. People saw it, photographed it, and filmed it on video. And this footage is still circulating on the internet. All of it is real. Then, ufologists became interested in the creature. They got the body for themselves under various pretexts. And then it just disappeared. The trail was lost forever. Alyoshenka never made it to a proper laboratory. And Tamara herself was hit by a car late at night in 1999. The only person who saw the creature alive was gone. Officially, science is certain that it was a human fetus. A premature baby with severe developmental defects looks exactly like that. An elongated skull, huge eye sockets, an underdeveloped body, and the 4 fingers and gray skin are explained in the story. It sounds logical and it's hard to argue with, but now I'll tell you something that usually isn't mentioned when this story is told. Kishtim is not just a remote Ural town. The Mayak plant is located very close by, and in 1957 a container with radioactive waste exploded there. It was one of the earliest nuclear accidents in history. Entire villages were exposed to radiation. People were quietly relocated. The disaster was kept classified for decades, so the world didn't learn about it for a long time. This raises a question. If a sick baby was really born in these parts, wasn't it that same radiation that made him that way? The land, water, and air here were all poisoned for years, and the authorities kept silent about it. I'm not claiming that Alyoshenka is a consequence of that accident. It's impossible to prove now. After all, there's no body, but the place and time match too well to believe it's just a coincidence. And you know what scares me the most? But we probably can't even imagine how many more nuclear disasters have been kept hidden from us. Because in the race for nuclear weapons, secrecy has always been more important than people's safety. The U.S. exposed its own population to radiation during tests. Britain covered up the accident and contamination in Windscale, but it was the Soviet Union that truly perfected the art of keeping silent. And against this background, the disappearance of the body of the little creature near Kishtim doesn't seem like a coincidence at all. Giant fishing canals. Archaeologists made a sensational discovery. In Belize, on the territory of the modern Crooked Tree Reserve, 4,000-year-old fishing canals were discovered, created by the predecessors of the Maya civilization. Using data from drones and Google Earth images, researchers identified a complex network of earthen canals stretching for several kilometers through marshy areas. These unique zigzag-shaped canals indicate that people were already actively modifying the landscape at that time. Around the canals, archaeologists found jagged points that were probably used for fishing, such as catching catfish, as well as reservoirs for storing the catch. It is believed that the canals were built about 4,000 years ago by semi-sedentary peoples on the Yucatan coast and were used for more than 1,000 years. This coincides with the formative period, when the Maya began transitioning to settled agriculture and forming their unique culture. Major landscape changes, such as these canals, preceded the construction of the great Maya temples, roads, and pyramids, becoming the foundation of their cultural development. These canals not only provided food, but also contributed to population growth and dietary diversity. Archaeologists believe that the knowledge and experience of these early peoples played an important role in the emergence of the great Maya civilization, connecting it to more ancient traditions. The disappearance of the most ancient civilization 900 years ago, one of the world's oldest civilizations, Cahokia, vanished. A new study has cast doubt on the previous theory that the cause was drought. The Cahokia Mounds, located near modern-day St. Louis, were a thriving settlement with a population of about 50,000 people. By 1400, this place was deserted, and the reasons for the mass exodus still remain a mystery to archaeologists. Archaeologists conducted soil analyses at Cahokia, studying carbon isotopes left by plants that grew during the period of mass population outflow. The results showed that the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 remained stable. This indicates that there were no significant changes in local vegetation and does not support the theory of crop failure. It is known that the residents of Cahokia were inventive and may have had skills in irrigation and crop storage. In addition, their diet was diverse, including fish, birds, deer, fruits, and nuts, which ensured survival even if some food sources were lost. So why did they leave Cahokia? Archaeologists suggest that it was a long process caused by external factors. To better understand the reasons, scientists plan to create a database of paleobotanical evidence and conduct experiments growing ancient crops in controlled conditions. The oldest photograph in Germany. The invention of photography is generally dated to 1839. However, a photograph was discovered in Munich that changes history. A photograph taken 2 years earlier was found in a German museum. The 4 by 4 centimeter photograph shows a Munich road. The landmark is the Frauenkirche Cathedral. The photograph was taken by the German scientist Franz von Kobel in 1837. The researcher Cornelia Kemp found this photo in the archive. Previously, it was believed that the oldest photograph in Germany dated back to 1839. It was in that year that Louis Daguerre invented the daguerreotype. But the discovery in Munich shows that the first photograph in Germany was taken in March 1837. Kobel noted the date on the back of the photograph, which was made using salt print. In the photograph, Frauenkirche appears as a shadow against the dark sky. The image is inverted and was exposed for hours. The oldest photograph in Germany will not be on permanent display at the museum. It will be kept in a special room with a low temperature. Bread from a dead man. In September 1991, 2 tourists were walking through the Alps on the border of Italy and Austria and noticed a human body in a melting glacier. At first, they thought it was some unlucky mountaineer who had frozen there just recently, but it turned out that the person had been lying in the ice for more than 5,000 years. He was nicknamed Edzé. He was named after the Ötztal Alps. This was the Copper Age, deep antiquity, and yet the body was preserved as if he had died quite recently. His skin, internal organs, even the contents of his stomach and more than 60 tattoos were preserved. By the way, he didn't die from the cold. Later, an arrowhead was found in his shoulder. Edzé was killed by a shot in the back, and he bled to death somewhere high up in the mountains. Scientists have been studying him for more than 30 years, but recently, Austrian biologists decided to look where no one had looked before, inside his body, at the microbes, and they found an entire living world there. There were also special cold-loving yeasts, fungi that slept for thousands of years in deep sub-zero temperatures, simply biding their time. In the laboratory, they slowly began to revive them. At first, the ancient yeast didn't understand at all what was expected of them, so the scientists carefully for months got them used to regular flour. And then the fungi seemed to wake up, and they started working exactly like modern baker's yeast. They used this starter to make regular dough. It rose just fine in a day, and those who dared to try the bread first all say in unison that it turned out incredibly fluffy and delicious. But the scientists don't plan to stop at bread. Now the same team wants to brew beer using yeast from Eds as well. And since its microbes are wild and ancient, the taste of this beer promises to be, to put it mildly, unusual. I bake sourdough bread myself. I know this business and I really love it. But eating bread made with yeast from the body of a person who died 5,000 years ago? No, thank you. I completely understand that it's safe. The scientists have checked everything 100 times. But still, it's hard to wrap my head around. You die somewhere in the mountains, and thousands of years later, your descendants will be baking bread and brewing beer from you. The resurrected Telamon. This unique atlas from the Temple of Zeus in the ancient city of Agrigento in Sicily is one of the most impressive examples of monumental sculpture from the 5th century BC. The temple, built in the Doric style, was considered one of the largest temples of the ancient world, and its architecture reflected the power of Greek civilization. The telamons, which served as supports, had symbolic meaning, representing titanic strength holding up the sky or the immense weight of the architectural structure. These giant statues, about 7.5 meters tall, were impressive both in their detail and in their size. One of the telamons was restored and placed in its original location, demonstrating the complexity of the engineering and artistic solutions of the ancient masters. But myths and mysteries surround the atlas. Some researchers believe that the images of the Titans could reflect ancient myths about the confrontation between gods and giants, and their position in the temple could symbolize their subjugation. Others believe that such size and shape could have been used as images of extraterrestrial beings, in which the ancient inhabitants believed. The mysteries of the underground world of Agartha, the legend of the underground world of Agartha, has always attracted the attention of those who sought hidden knowledge in secret civilizations. The Nazis showed great interest in the myth of Agartha, a supposed state deep underground inhabited by an advanced civilization possessing mystical knowledge and advanced technologies. It was believed that the inhabitants of Agartha might possess the secrets of immortality, energy, and control over the world. This greatly interested the Nazi elite. Some Nazi ideologists saw Agartha not only as a source of ancient knowledge, but also as a possible refuge for the elite of the Third Reich in case of defeat on the surface. According to the theory, this underground world could provide a secure shelter and create conditions for the revival of Nazi power. Legends claim that the entrance to Agartha is hidden somewhere in the Himalayas or other hard-to-reach regions of the Earth. Researchers from Ahnenerbe, fascinated by the search for Aryan roots and ancient civilizations, organized expeditions to different parts of the world, including Tibet and Antarctica, in search of the entrance to the underground world. Despite the lack of concrete evidence for the existence of Agartha, the Nazis continued to fund these projects, hoping to gain access to mystical knowledge that could change the course of the war and strengthen their influence. Wild animals in royal burials. The Sungir site on the outskirts of Vladimir in Russia. It was discovered by accident in one millennium, in the year of the millennium, when they were digging a pit for a brick factory, and an excavator hit a mammoth tusk, and underneath it they found a burial of people from the Ice Age, about 30,000 years old, the very ones who are depicted as savages in furs in textbooks. They were not well preserved. The bone looks intact in the ground, but as soon as you touch it, it crumbles into dust. So extracting and preserving these skeletons was a huge challenge in itself. They were buried in a way that savages are not. The man was lying in clothing decorated with beads made from mammoth ivory, and there were several thousand of these beads. Each one was carved and drilled by hand. It took years of work to make a single outfit. A row of graves belongs to two children laid head to head, and with them is a whole arsenal. Animal figurines, rings with slits, and spears straightened from solid mammoth ivory. One of them is almost 2.5 meters long. But the most terrifying thing was discovered recently when the skeletons were re-examined with modern equipment. This man was murdered. A stone arrowhead was stuck in his neck, which severed an artery, and there was a finishing blow to the forehead with a stone from above as if he was kneeling, and it seems the children were also killed. One boy had a hole in his pelvic bone from a sharp weapon, and DNA revealed something strange. They weren't a brother and sister as people had believed for half a century, but two unrelated boys, one of whom couldn't walk in his lifetime. So now think about it. 30,000 years ago, someone killed these children, and then they were buried more richly than any chief. They were covered with thousands of beads and precious spears. What kind of ritual did they have back then? No one can say anymore who was sacrificed and for what, or why it was these particular children. The earth preserved the murder for us, but took its reason with it. Russian pyramids. If you haven't seen them in person, you've surely heard about the grandeur of the Egyptian pyramids on the Giza Plateau. This architectural ensemble, which has amazed the world with its magnificence for centuries, is considered one of the most monumental. But Russian researchers have proposed an alternative, pointing to the existence of even older pyramids in Russia, spanning areas from the Kola Peninsula to the Black Sea. The first discovery of such pyramid structures took place on the Kola Peninsula in 2001, and their dating indicated an age twice that of their Egyptian counterparts. Subsequent findings confirmed the artificial origin of these pyramids, which were built between 9,000 and 40,000 years ago. In 2010, researchers discovered another ancient pyramid, noting the similarity of construction techniques to those used in Egyptian and Chinese structures. In the Krasnoyarsk region, there is Mount Chernaya, an extinct volcano that was named Pyramid because of its three-sided shape and man-made masonry, which was discovered in 1993. In Rostov-on-Don, there is the Arya Sanctuary, a unique structure that predates the Egyptian pyramids by 1,000 years and was built according to the golden ratio principle. Crimea is especially rich in such finds. In 2001, 7 pyramids were found, lined up between Sevastopol and Foros, and are believed to be 2,000 years older than the Egyptian ones. Their architecture resembles the Tibetan and Mexican pyramids, indicating the existence of an ancient, advanced civilization. It's hard to believe that the Egyptian pyramids aren't as ancient as we were told before. Such findings also confirm that the Egyptians were not the first to create such grand structures. To this day, humanity is still puzzled in trying to understand why people in ancient times built pyramid structures all over the globe. Spanish Stonehenge. This amazing megalithic monument, known as the Spanish Stonehenge, is located on the banks of the Tagus River in Spain. Its age is estimated to be about 7,000 years, which makes it 2,000 years older than the famous Stonehenge in England and older than the Egyptian pyramids. The complex consists of more than 100 vertically placed granite stones, forming a circle and ellipses. Officially, this site is called the Guadalperro Dolmen, and its purpose still remains a mystery. Scientists suggest that it could have served as a place for rituals, a temple, or possibly even an astronomical observatory. The stones are arranged in such a way that their orientation is connected to the position of the sun during certain times of the year. This confirms that the ancient builders had deep knowledge of astronomy. For a long time, the dolmen was underwater because of the construction of a dam in 1963. A recent drought finally let archaeologists and researchers revisit this amazing site. What inspired ancient people to create such a grand structure? A script that no one can read. The Urals, a peat bog near Yekaterinburg, January 24, 1890. Gold miners pull pieces of darkened wood with strange carvings out of the peat. Later, they will put them together, and a figure several meters tall will appear, a wooden idol with a head that has several faces. Scientists will call it the Shigir idol, after the place where it was found. Most likely, it was an image of some deity or spirit that ancient people worshipped, their wooden god. For a long time, no one suspected how old the idol was, believing it was only a few thousand years old. And then in 1997, they finally did a radiocarbon dating, and it turned out to be about 9,500 years old. Scientists didn't believe it. It turned out that simple hunters carved a complex statue with symbols at a time when, according to common beliefs, people hadn't yet reached that level of art. But the story didn't end there. In 2014, German scientists re-examined the idol using more precise methods and took samples from deep inside the wood where they hadn't reached before. The idol became even older again. Now it is estimated to be between 11 and 12,000 years old. That's twice as old as the Egyptian pyramids and older than Stonehenge. It turns out that when someone carved this figure, people didn't even know how to grow their own food yet and survived only by hunting. And the fact that it survived to our time is a real miracle. It's all thanks to the peat. It doesn't let air through, and wood doesn't rot in it, but is preserved for thousands of years. Once, the idol was enormous, about 5 meters tall, 3 times the height of a person. But part of it was lost over time, and today, only what survived is on display at the Yekaterinburg Museum, about 3 to 3.5 meters tall. But the main mystery isn't even its age. The entire figure is covered with symbols, lines, rhombuses, and human faces placed one above the other. These are clearly not random scratches, and there is some kind of system to them. It's as if someone wanted to say something with this. But exactly what, we don't know, and most likely we'll never find out. So what we have before us is the oldest message of humanity, but we can't read it. Mysterious stumps on the seashore. The purpose of the mysterious Bronze Age structure, known as Seahenge, has long puzzled archaeologists since its discovery in 1999 on a beach in Norfolk, England. However, recently scientists have found that the site at Seahenge, or home, one consists of an upside-down oak stump surrounded by 55 split trunks. It was built in late spring of 2049 BC on a salt marsh protected by dunes and muddy sandbanks. Amateur archaeologist John Lorimer discovered the monument when he noticed a bronze axe head in the sand. He started digging and found a stump with a ritual ring around it. This discovery sparked fierce protests from local residents, but archaeologists brought home one to the Lynn Museum, where its parts were preserved with wax. Hill 2, found nearby and left in place, has been almost completely destroyed by the tides. Archaeologists believe that these structures were built to control the weather. At that time, the climate was harsh, with frosty winters and late springs, which had a significant impact on agriculture. The birch logs of Sikinsha were cut down in the spring and arranged to align with the sunrise on the day of the summer solstice. This is connected to the belief that the cuckoo symbolizes fertility, returns to the other world, and takes summer away with it. The cuckoo ritual involves catching it to prolong the summer. In the center of Hill, 2 sacrifices were made to Venus, which according to beliefs helped agriculture. These rituals were performed every 8 years in accordance with the Venus cycle. Thus, both monuments sought in different ways to put an end to the harsh cold. The ancient necropolis of Persian kings. Before you is one of the most impressive bas-reliefs of ancient Persia, a depiction of the victory of Shahanshah Shapurthur over the Roman Emperor Valerian. This monument is located in Naksh-e-Rustam, the ancient necropolis of Persian kings in Iran. On the bas-relief, Shapurthur is seated on a horse in luxurious armor, and before him kneeling is Philip the Arab, the Roman emperor who made peace with the Persians. But most importantly, he is holding the captured Valerian in his hands. This was the only time in history when a Roman emperor was taken prisoner. After the defeat at the Battle of Edessa in the year 260, Valerian was never able to return. According to different sources, he died in captivity or was killed. This bas-relief is not just a historical monument, but a symbol of the greatness of the Persian Empire. It reminded everyone who passed by that the Romans, the main power of that time, suffered a humiliating defeat. 800 million years underground. Siberia, the village of Rzhavchik in the Kemerovo region. September 5, 1969. Deep underground, about 70 meters from the surface, miners are extracting coal, and suddenly they come across a marble sarcophagus. At first they were excited, thinking there were treasures hidden inside, but when they removed the lid, there was a pink transparent liquid inside. And inside it lay a young woman. She looked about 30 years old tall, with long dark hair and a white lace dress. But she didn't look dead at all. That's why she was called the Tea-Sul Princess, the real Sleeping Beauty. And next to her head, right in the liquid, there was a small black box, eerily similar to a modern phone. Then comes the part that made this story a legend. One of the miners couldn't resist, dipped his finger into the unknown liquid from the millions of years old coffin, and decided to taste it. Genius, what can I say? A week later, he went insane. In winter, he froze to death at his own doorstep, never realizing it was his house. Just hours after he was found, people in gray protective suits arrived in the village. I don't know how they found out about the discovery so fast in such a remote area. The sarcophagus was swiftly loaded into a helicopter and taken away. After a while, these people came back. They collected newspapers from every house that reported the discovery. The scientists who examined the body and spoke out, along with the newspaper editor, were reportedly punished. Everyone who saw the princess began dying one by one over the next few years. The strangest part, said the scientist who examined the body, according to him, this woman is more than 800 million years old. That's not even the time of the dinosaurs. That was actually a time when there was hardly anything alive on Earth at all. No one ever explained how the body lay there for so long without decaying, or what kind of liquid preserved it. And there was no one left to ask. The body was taken away, the newspapers were confiscated, and there were no witnesses left. There is absolutely no evidence for this story. No body, no sarcophagus, not a single proper photograph. So most likely it's just a legend that, over time, became embellished with details and spread everywhere. Now just think about it. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old. In that time, dozens of civilizations could have appeared and disappeared. Some burned, some froze, and some were struck by a comet. And every time, the few who survived had to start all over again with nothing. So why are we so sure that we are the first and only ones who have come this far? Or maybe, long ago, civilizations that managed to leave our planet long before us are now watching us and see us as mere primitives. Write in the comments whether you agree with this or not. And like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because a new video is coming soon.